Recording on this. So we're starting off with big breaths and whatever adjustments your body needs for more pleasure. I invite you to expand your lungs and actually breathe into the massage, that when you really expand the ribs and the chest, and then you take full breaths, letting it all go, that the heart gets a massage. And this is a really sweet sensation, in the core, that there's pleasure just in breathing. And I invite you to breathe down into the pelvic bowl. So direct your awareness into the pelvis, maybe touch in with the tailbone. You may want to subtly undulate, like very slowly, just feel a little rotation in the hips with the breath. And instead of dropping down into the earth today, we're going to bring our awareness to the pelvic bowl as like a cauldron or chalice. I invite you to feel that that's the base of the body holding your eros. So as you breathe and bring prana into the pelvis, you can imagine almost like liquid filling into the cauldron, that there's this ecstatic current or energy. So let yourself gather that energy with your breath, collecting it at the base of your body for the next 5 breaths. Visualizing that the bowl is filling with life force. And from this foundation, I invite you to amplify, or as you breathe, you can actually magnify the eros. And eros isn't just sexual energy, it's all your sensitivity. So feel whatever fabrics are touching your body. Like notice the skin on the air on your skin, where you're warm or cool. Notice the flavor in your mouth. And the aroma or senses of the air. And as you notice the subtle sounds in the space, or the sound of my voice, notice also who's listening. Like have a sense of connection with the sounds, the outside meeting the inside. Who's sensing the colors if your eyes are closed, and the textures behind your eyelids? Just a few more breaths to notice how this erotic energy, this eros, this life force, is not ours individually, but it belongs to life itself. And I invite you to feel the presence of your partner whose senses are awakened. Just tune in to their conscious sensitivity and notice how that can heighten your own, how we can magnify each other. So permission to feel. And finally, take a moment to tune in to today's inquiry. So we're going to be exploring how to be better lovers in this partnership. And that starts with what we bring, what we give, what our gifts are. So take a moment to just self-assess. And what is the one thing that you know you could do to upgrade your sex life? What is the one thing that you have, control of or access to, or something that you can actually commit to or practice and feel into? Perhaps it's knowing what your partner wants from you, knowing what's been missing. Maybe there's a limiting belief to drop. Take a few more breaths to crystallize this, because this will be our share this morning. What one practice or way of being is going to upgrade your sex life? 3 more breaths. And the final breath, you can let out with sound and open your eyes. Take a really deep breath together. Okay, so we're going to go around the circle this morning and hear each partner's commitment. And it may be something that gets upgraded through the course of our mastermind. And after we do our, check-in, then we'll dive deeper. We'll also see who's got some hot topic on sex and wants to be on the hot seat, perhaps, and get some support from the rest of the group. But I also let's focus on this, and then we'll do a check-in on also the list, the other homework of 20 things that
2020.
Yeah, 20 sexy things we want to do before 2020.
The end of 2020.
Yeah, so that's sort of the roadmap for the day. Would you like to start?
Sure. There are 2 things that came up for me. One was probably the more important one, which is commitment to asking more for sex and communicating more with you, about what I want, and doing it in a way that is the most conducive, which is, being in, touching you and being with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then really communicating.
Beautiful.
The other one is actually just doing a bit more ejaculatory control. And really keeping that in and not ejaculating so often and pulling that back in. I've been playing with that, and that's been helping a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna do more of that.
Beautiful.
So
good.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, sweet. So I'll share next that. So one of the things that I know about oral sex is it's such a tender and vulnerable practice, and it's also like a high art. It's also like this high devotional practice, and so it's these 2 things where it can bring up wounding, and then it can also bring up like the high and the holy. And I have a limiting belief about our oral sex that I know doesn't serve, our being in healthy practice. And that belief is it's actually resentment that I feel. Like the story is that I give oral sex so much more than you do, that I actually resent giving oral sex now. Like, and I know that it's just a story, because when I'm actually doing it, that falls away and I love it. But I need to drop that, because it actually allows me, it inhibits me from receiving as well as giving. And so my practice, the one thing I want to do is like, I want to dissolve that story and be in like the celebratory, mutual receiving and giving of oral sex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Nice.
Okay, so obviously we went first because it's vulnerable, but I want to hear who's willing to disclose next.
I see Renee and Todd.
Okay, great. So we have you on mute. There you go.
The funniest thing, thank you for modeling that, because I had it all in my head about how, my focus on sexuality was cultivating the sacred, appreciating the playful, but cultivating the sacred. And that's kind of great, but that's pretty up in the clouds. So I really appreciate that down in the weeds modeling that you guys just did for us. And it's right on the tip of my tongue. And I know it's a big thing, and it's been a big thing for about 6 or 7 years. So this is perfect. I think the big thing for me is that I got stuck in the story of anytime I wanted sex or was feeling amorous, whether it was playful or sacred, that I felt like I was being selfish because of some wounding in our relationship a long ass time ago. And so I think probably the biggest thing for me to work on is letting that go. And cultivating the sacred in our sexual connection.
Yeah.
So it's an and now instead of just a wall.
Big breath. Beautiful.
That's all I got.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
The thing that comes up for me, it's really two things. For me, first being, I just need to generally slow down and soften, because I know generally in my slowness, it opens the door for him to connect more, and to create those kind of sweet moments that end up then blossoming into a sexual connection as well. So really slowing down, I think, is important. The other thing is that, like, I haven't been proactive about asking for it. So then I get resentful when I don't get it enough. And so I need to just really work on finding a gentle way to say, sweetheart, I would really love some intimate connection with you right now, and slow down and open the doors to that, and then not be attached what that ends up looking like, because it's really the intimacy that I want anyway. So really getting proactive about asking for what I want.
Oh my goodness.
Yep.
In one sec, in saying that, I just realized something about the dynamic in that. If I'm feeling selfish and not feeling like I want to move, like I'm going to be forward about engaging with you sexually, and it's not like this happens all the time, but there's a trend in here. If I'm reluctant to move forward and you're not asking, then we're staying apart.
Exactly.
When these stories start to have a little traction, it's creating separation. It's not creating closeness. So we have to pay way more attention to that.
Agreed.
Thank you, guys.
Agreed.
Beautiful. It's so beautiful, and it's such a it's a gorgeous recognition of what one of our coaches calls a Velcro loop, which is like when one partner has one half and the other partner has the other, and then you're stuck in a certain pattern. Yeah. And so it's beautiful to see it's a co-creation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that you both want it.
Yeah. Who wants to go next? I think Greg Rex, did you say I'll go? Because you're muted.
I'll go.
Okay, I lip read that. Go ahead.
Well, the first big thing is that I'm working diligently on getting us to the place where we're not apart for 4 to 5 weeks at a time. It's going to be 5 weeks since we've seen each other. But on Monday, I'm leaning into love. I'm saying no to fear, and we're going to be on the phone with her attorney to talk about what would have to happen for her to move here to live with me.
Yay!
And that's pretty big. And her daughter is coming to Thanksgiving to spend a week with us in Tahoe. And then for Christmas, her daughter and her mother are spending a week with us. So we're kind of test driving this family unit thing. And I'm feeling very nervous and excited at the same time. So that's the big thing for this logistics, so we can have sex. When we are together, the biggest thing.
All the stuff you have to go through just to have sex.
That's fantastic.
The one realization that I have that I really want to take responsibility for is I'm actually really good at breathing. I've been breathing consciously for a long time, and surfing has enhanced that to a big level. But I'm not as intentional when I'm making love as I could be. And I think if I really held that, then she would follow, and then our tantric connection would go through the roof if it was more consistent. So I'm going to really make that my practice.
Oh, what a gift. Beautiful, Greg. Yeah. Let's all take a breath. Thank you. Yeah, and I want to highlight this for everyone. You know, Charles Muir talks about I'm sorry, I'm trying to change the whatever. Orgasms, and he talks a lot about how orgasmic energy in the genitals is, can just be a little sneeze, or it can be this whole body experience. And the real distinction between these whole body tantric orgasms and genital focused is the breath and how it travels and where it travels. And basically people will, at point of orgasm, they'll clench and hold their breath. And that cuts off, the holding of the breath at orgasm cuts off the whole pleasurable response. But it doesn't just cut off our degree of sensation and feeling. It also cuts off our access to awareness and insight. Because so many times, orgasm can lift the veils between worlds where we can get revelation and oracle, but it's on the conduit of breath that comes through. So I love that you brought that in for all of us, Greg.
Yeah. And I would just want to put a little thing on that too, because I interviewed Charles Muir for my book on ejaculatory mastery, and he didn't talk at all about how to extend, and not ejaculate. He talked about once you do ejaculate, how you can make that a big, long, thing that could go for minutes even. And through breathing. Yeah, through breathing. So you're on the right track, looking there.
Yay.
So, yeah.
Sweet. Who wants to share next? Lisa and Greg. You're on mute. You got it.
Yeah.
So, what came to me when you posed the question was, can you pose the question again? Can you set it up?
What one thing could you do to upgrade your sex life in this partnership?
I think the one thing that I could do would be to clean slate it.
Mm.
So we have been together for 25 fucking years. We were 23, I was 22 when we met, right? That possibility excites me. I don't want to talk about we haven't had sex for a while. That's part of our challenge. And there's a lot whatever. I'll just put it out there. I'm not going to, whatever. And so I kind of feel like we get to have a do-over. like let's just because we've have other partners and we've been developing and evolving sexually, and I've been excited about the prospect of coming back together just in a new way. And I just feel like for me, the best thing I contribute would just be like clean slate, like new partner, like fun, exciting. Let's get to know each other again, fresh. And I don't know. I just feel like, I don't know. It doesn't feel good to me to kind of go back to the way it was and think about how to make it better. It just feels like it could be something, for me, it feels like it could just be completely something new.
Gorgeous. Yeah. Michael and I can testify to, there was a point in our remarriage that we did that as well. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I had the experience of we're in a renaissance now, and a big part of that's because we
just let go of a lot of
the past
stuff. that metaphor of the file cabinets of resentments, and just those file cabinets are gone. They're not even there anymore. I can't even remember what we were arguing about, for a big part of our
and so next week,
life.
This is for everybody. Next week we're going to be talking about finances. Right. So these are the different areas. Couples argue about sex. They argue about money. And, Michael and I, money, we can count on our hands how many times we've thought about money. But sex, this has always been a big, big, big issue. So it's really great to be in a new marriage where it's not. And I support and hold that vision for you and Greg. Good. Greg, what about for you?
Yeah. Because I'm going through a lot of soul searching right now, I kind of feel like I'm going through what Lisa has just described, but with myself, and kind of reevaluating every domain of my life. And for me, when it comes to Lisa, part of what's needed there is really just to reestablish the connection. And so we just before the call, we did the dyad that we had talked with you about during our call the other day, and for that 20 or 30 minutes, there was connection that was built there.
Yeah.
And so, I guess for me, it's a commitment to leaning into the connection and just not just like starting over with the physical stuff, but also the emotional, kind of spiritual, mental part of it as well. Just reconnect on all levels.
Beautiful. Yeah. So the word intimacy kind of sums up, a lot of that, the connection on all levels, intimacy. And what I'm hearing from you is wanting to I guess it's like come back to intimacy, come into intimacy in a new way from.
Yeah. Well, come into it as who we are now without all the past, quarter of a century of stuff that we had with us.
Good. All right. So I want to dig in just a little bit and ask, how do you envision doing that? Because that's a beautiful, but practically speaking, what does that look like?
Well, this dyad that we did about feel who you are here and now.
Great.
That's a great starting point. And to be honest, like the other day when we were chatting about it, I was kind of feeling resistant to it. And I was even feeling resistant to it this morning, but as we got into it and started to go through multiple cycles of it, I, kind of settled into it.
Good.
And I think that that's a good pathway.
Excellent. Beautiful. Okay, sweet. Well, thank you both for showing up. I know this is So interesting. I'll say this for all of us, which is that, you know, growth happens where when we do a graduation, then we end up and we feel like we're in kindergarten again. It's like, oh, I mastered so much, and now I'm in kindergarten for the next lesson. So I just wanted to acknowledge the humility that you're both showing up with, given that you're in a, you know, in a deep, yeah, it takes humility to start over, to beginner's mind, you know, when you actually know each other so deeply. So I really honor how masterful it is to be in beginner's mind. Yeah.
Thank you.
We're
Yeah.
gonna rock next month.
Good. Yeah. That's exciting.
Yeah, we don't fight over money.
We don't.
All right. So James and Sharmila.
Can we go?
Um, there's a number of things, but I feel like one of the things that comes up for me is that I sort of overthink things. Like when I actually do have like a deep desire for like connection and sex, I like try to decide if it's a good time and like really put it in sort of a logical box, which doesn't really leave a lot of room for expression. So it's probably a place I could start.
All right. So before we switch over, I want you to answer the question. You know, given that overthinking is the old pattern, what's the one thing that you could do to upgrade your sex life, and what does that look like?
Following my impulses through more. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. James?
I don't know, this is a hard and I guess sort of vulnerable one for me to answer. Like you know, because when you asked like what could I do, I was trying to think about like what could I do to be a better lover to her, and so I started like running through all these different ideas of like what would she want that I don't do or that I could do more of, and like just nothing was sticking. And I think, you know, what that kind of was bringing to the surface for me is that throughout most of our relationship, I felt like our sex drives are just on pretty dramatically different ends of the spectrum. And like the way I experience is that there's actually nothing that she wants sexually. That like there's already this saturation because of the fact that I want it more than she does. And so like I've never been able to get clear on any fantasies or desires or like things I could show up for. Like and so I think that like when I actually tune into like what I could do to be a better lover, what it feels like is a combination of trying to have more clear conversations about what exactly is and isn't wanted sexually, and then trying to identify and work on the wounding that I have around feeling like I want her more than she wants me, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But like it feels more like it's an emotional thing than anything having to do with like physical practice or change in behavior.
Yeah. So to reflect back, the work for you is on the emotional wounding underneath the story that you want it more than she does.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Beautiful. Yeah. And, you know, I will repeat, you know, it bears repeating, you know, that a lot of the kind of motto in sex therapy is that there's no problems in sex. It's usually problems in communication or intimacy or emotions or even sometimes finances, you know, that the problems aren't often in sex, unless you have, you know, hormonal imbalances or, you know, there's obviously powerful exceptions to that statement, but I'm appreciating the self-awareness in this circle around how complex sex is. And I'm curious. I think it'd be fun to switch gears and to hear about the homework, making the list of 20 things that you want to do before 2020. Who did it? What did you get from it? Any shared insights around, we came up with our own new one that's not on the list. So yeah, it'd be fun to kind of put that into the space, because some people I know are still working on it. But it's a fun process. So just raise your hand if you did the homework, the list of 2020, if you looked at that. All right. Got it. You guys are a bunch of overachievers. All right, let me talk a little bit more about it then, to hopefully motivate you to do this piece. Because honestly, and it's funny because Greg Rex's picture is like frozen like this. He was the one that posted and said, this is the funnest homework he's ever done, or funnest, homework he's been assigned. It certainly was challenging, actually, for Michael and I. We got into a real
argument. Conflict.
Yeah, because there's like landmines in that conversation. But yet at the same time, we now have a list of 20 things. Like we're sexual adventurers and pioneers, as are, I know, a lot of you. And now to be like, wow, I don't think we've ever had, we always have some kind of like goal each year in all categories of life. So sex, we might put something like we did, like, oh, let's work on our oral sex this year. Or let's work on, more flirting, or we have had different things. But to actually have 20 things that we're both excited about doing in 2020, even though it took some grit to get there, is like, it's hot. It's really hot. And the first thing on our list, which we're doing right now and checking off, and I have a big smile as a result, is this, do you want to tell them what the first thing is?
Yeah, it's to have oral sex every day for 7 days.
Yeah.
So we're 5 days in.
And I've had oral sex I've received oral sex every day this week.
She's a new person.
So happy. And what's cool is it's like when you have it like this thing, and Michael's really cute because he's all, if I miss a day, do we get to like keep trying, like keep going do we start over and do another week? But the excitement in it is that it's not, now that it's like a gamified, it's not this agendic, like, oh, oral sex is foreplay to get somewhere, or oral sex is a pattern. It's more like I feel a little bit more like a bonobo, like, oh, the animal body is just getting greeted, like with attention and love, and it might be quick, or it might be deep, or it might, so I'm just very, very pleased with seeing the results of this list already. And the other benefit, I think, of doing the list, I learned a lot in the no's, like the things that I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. Because a lot of those no's were, ooh, I've got wounding on that, or that was uncomfortable last time we tried it, or I have a story about that. And that's like shining a light into the sexual shadow. So, it might just be a fun, playful list, but to actually like tune in and notice, ooh, that doesn't feel good to me, means like I've got blocks inside me. My sexual current, my eros is kinked up in certain ways that I'd rather just be like, ooh, this flows, let's flow over here. And that's great. But from a place of abundance and flow, I can kind of go back and be like, hey, now what was that little limitation?
Yeah, it's definitely a much deeper tool than it seems on the surface. And I'm actually really curious to hear what people, what you guys were feeling about it. Like, was it something that just seemed like too simple, or did it seem?
Most people just don't have time, is my assessment of why you haven't done it. Lisa has something to say. You're on mute, honey.
I'm just calling myself out on that bullshit story. So I don't let us convince you that we don't have time.
Good.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. I don't know.
For me, I think it's yeah.
Yeah, I would. I don't want to put that into. I don't want to just say, oh, people didn't have time, because that's, if people are saying that's, obviously it's a form of resistance
it's not
as well. But I'd like to hear what people are thinking. Like really, like go one level deeper. If that's it, if it wasn't enough time, what is it? That go one, take one layer of the onion off and look down at that next one.
I mean, not necessarily speaking to resistance, but am I on mute or?
You're
on.
James, go, and then we'll come back to Todd. He was on mute and trying to speak. Go.
Oh, sorry. You go for it.
No, go ahead, James.
Yeah.
No, it's like I was actually really excited to do this exercise. I did. I think the same day I think it's pretty much as soon as you guys sent the list over, I went through it, and my main thing was I was disappointed that there weren't more options on there. The lists were so like overlapping. I ended up I decided to color code mine.
Yay.
Because like I think the instruction was basically like, you've already done it, you're not interested, or you're interested.
Yeah.
And there was only a couple things that I really wasn't interested in, and then there was like most everything I was. So then I decided like add color for like the things that I was the most interested in, so that we could actually narrow it down. And we were supposed to like share ours yesterday, and had time on the calendar, but then Charma got really sick, so we haven't actually done the rest of it. But the starting the process was fun, and we sort of came up with a new one.
Yeah, let's hear that.
We didn't come up with it doing the homework. We came up with it separate, but I've always been trying to get her to join the Mile High Club with me, and she hasn't wanted to because it feels too iffy. And she was like, well, I'll do it in a private jet.
Ooh.
And I started looking at, because we're trying to organize this like poly vacation to bring a whole group of lovers down to Bali. So now I'm trying to figure out like if there's a cost-effective way, since there's going to be a whole group of us, to charter a jet and then be able to have an orgy on the plane on the way down.
Oh, I think so game.
I think your definition of cost-effective is going to come into play here.
Yeah. All relative.
Yeah, that's right.
Todd?
We didn't have time. Was truly this last couple of weeks, time has truly been the challenge. But when I started to conceptualize my list in my head, what I noticed is that the themes point me back to the same things. All of these kind of practical things that come to mind about this, that, the other thing are all pointing me back to, again, this idea of reverence, sacredness, my own mindfulness, and the nugget that I keep coming back to is this idea of removing the destination and the obstructions to being fully present in the moment with my partner, in this case Renee. And I think all of the wounding and the letting go of the stories is really all driving towards the same sort of core idea around how I feel sexuality at this point in my life is most enriching, I think is a good word, decent word. And holding that and standing in the ground of that, and then actions and little practices like practical steps all sort of flow around that.
It's beautiful. Gorgeous. I want to share with you, piggybacking off of what you mentioned, which is presence and sexuality. I want to share with you one of these really deep debates. It's like a polemic in my field. So as a, Tantra teacher, there's all kinds of like teachings, not just in puja, about like being with the divine in the other, but being really present, being in the moment. And when you're in the sensuality, it's very much like what's sensually what's actually happening, as opposed to porn, erotica, and fantasy. And, and I do this, this self-pleasuring ritual. And during it, like it's done around the world. And when I do it, I actually allow people to bring their vibrators or bring whatever stimulants that they use. And a lot of my co-teachers are like, no, don't do that. Like vibrators are, it's like this hyper stimulus, that takes us out of of the present experience. And so there's a big debate, and not just the feminist debate about porn being objectifying of women and then unrealistic expectations and then hyperstimulus, but it's actually an esoteric metaphysical debate. So I want to point to how in the mystery schools, when we start doing sex magic, how people today who aren't really trained in sex magic will go to like some fantasy of like, I'm making $1 million, or this is my fantasy and I'm orgasming and I'm having this fantasy. And that's actually not what sex magic is. And one of the things that I want to impart is the degree to which we can be present with our sexuality, with eros, with the actual orgasmic experience, not present meaning not checking out in some fantasy, being somewhere else. That's the degree to which our sexual energy, it has potency. And that potency can actually pierce the veils between the internal and the external and recreate reality. But if we're in fantasy is different than vision and epiphany, and but when we're in fantasy, it actually diminishes our sexual potency. And so I want to impart this to you guys because you're advanced, but I'm not anti-fantasy. Please get that. Like fantasy as a realm and a dimension is a beautiful it's a beautiful thing to cultivate, not just daydreaming and visioning and fantasy. Like that's a creative realm, but it's not the same as the orgasmic presence. Mm-hmm. And that presence in itself has to be cultivated to have the potency of what's possible in these, if we're going to use sex towards enlightenment. Because there can be sex for recreation, there can be sex towards, procreation, towards relationship. In fact, a lot of sex sometimes is like, oh, I just want to have sex to bond us. But other times it's like, sex is a path to enlightenment. And for you to actually have the rocket fuel to get higher states of consciousness through your sexuality, it requires presence. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and this is really alive for me because I have coming out this winter a book called 52 Fridays, which has 52 fantasies. I'm super excited about the book, but it's like it's erotic fantasy that's not it's like it's important to note that that's a dimension and it's not the full spectrum of what sexuality is. So
that'll be in the next book, right?
Yeah. Still working on that. So, I'm curious. Okay. So yeah, do you want to?
Yeah, I think there's enough said right there. I want to let that sit, but yeah.
So with the homework of doing dyads, right? The piece in bed.
Is there anybody else that wants to speak about their
20? Yeah. Before we move on,
2020, any of the resistances they had, or just their experience with like coming up against that.
So I'm going to, because we're so low on the participation this week, I'm going to suggest, that everyone really do this homework and to actually post on the group about, I want to hold you accountable to doing this, not just next week we're going to talk about finances and we forgot about that. It's like homework has just been, this isn't extra credit. This is actually consequence. Since you didn't do the homework now, I want everyone to post your list. So we'll post ours today and on the group that says, here's our 20 before 2020. And that way we can hold you accountable and be like, ooh, let's see what everybody else is doing. Okay. Does that sound good?
Yeah. Okay. I do want to say something. So this came up since last week for me, which was I know we talked about the 4 drivers from Jack Morin, the things that drive us to to excitement, which are power exchange, the
Taboo.
Taboo, anticipation, and those 4. I recognized another one this week, and it's this thing about being in a relationship that's loving and deep relationship that can have its own excitement and fantasy, and we've kind of coined the term old relationship energy. I think I've said it a few times on here.
We didn't coin it, but yeah.
Well, I'm sure others have coined it as well, but we kind of worked through that in our pod meeting. That kind of came up because we were talking about new relationship energy and what's hot, and old relationship energy came up as a thing that's hot as well. And in our deep dive that we have going here, part of like you could say like a bucket list or bucket list might be to have a deep marriage with somebody for 10 years or 20 years or just very deep, not even having that time factor put in it, but the fact of going very, very deep with someone could be one of those items. And it's not an easy thing to say, oh yeah, I'm going to go very deep by the end of 2020, but I'm kind of challenging us for that it's not just, okay, we're going to, fly on an airplane with James and have sex with everybody, which sounds like fun. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have that one, James, but what I'm kind of pointing towards is something that can take us deeper than when we do these 20 and 20 before the end of 20, that we look at them as things that we could only do with somebody if we were in that deep space with them, and really kind of meditate on that, in our group, like feeling what is that that can make us, bring us to those things.
Michael had a revelation this week that was really game changing, I think, for our connection, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to share about soul consent.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my life, I've been poly for a long time. I've been an excellent communicator about consent, and I've been working on all of those like levels of consent. Consent, informed consent, and then this thing that's enthusiastic consent. Where
the hell yes.
Yeah, just like a hell yes with it, no vagary with it. But I've noticed that in my interactions with people that sometimes, I'll have all of those levels, but there's still something that's kind of missing. And I saw it earlier this year or in this past couple of years as being like a type of energetic penetration that I do, which is that I'll say things that might be a little bit, people aren't ready for, like telling a dirty joke or something that someone, didn't have consent to that, and it shocks them. And I'd always looked at it like, okay, well, I'm just being, totally transparent. I'm being honest. But the truth was I was doing energetic penetration with people, even asking them, would you like to have sex with me? That might, some people are like, whoa, I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for you to ask me that. And so I recognized that level. And then the next level is this thing about, really feeling consent, getting consent with their soul as well, which is, getting that type of soul connection where I know that their soul is interested in that connection, and it's very esoteric, it's very subtle, but I'm seeing those places now, and I'm seeing it as I interact with lovers. recently that that I can tell that I don't have soul consent when I'm with them, and it's I've just been tracking it. It's not fully formed.
I want to make the distinction between this and like energetic consent. I think most people now, who've had a taste of tantra and had, done cuddle parties, like they understand that there's a difference between asking for, do you want to kiss, and like energetically really reading and feeling it. But that's actually different than our energy body is not necessarily the soul. And it's really a profound insight that Michael had, because his reclaiming this actually opened a door between us. It was like, oh wow, I recognize the places where even we have been engaging and it wasn't in full soul consent. And now that that's part of our vocabulary, that's like another layer of looking at like, hey, we want to be orienting our whole life around our soul, or this deeper knowing of who we are and how do we be that in the world. And then we also want to like be in soul tribe in relationships with, like that it's not just, oh, we meet somebody and it'd be fun to play with them. It's like, we're really interested in this awakening to soul at the more collective level.
And the way it shows up when there isn't soul consent is these things like vague resentments and, like feeling like you're not listening to me, you're not hearing me, you're not feeling my soul. Which I like, but I'm here, I'm listening, I'm being
asking,
present.
Yeah.
But I got, I understood that, I wasn't getting it. It wasn't the soul. I wasn't hearing the soul. And it's again, it's very esoteric, and it's, I think it requires us just going, into this type of ritual, space, and recognizing it, that there is something there,
Yeah. And I suspect, yeah, go ahead. Before you share, Todd, I'll say, as I kind of scan the group, I suspect, James and Sharmila, that there's something really deep there for you in that, what you have stated is, and also for Greg and Lisa, what you stated of what you're working on. It sounds like this might inform, some of like, ooh, how do we, because it's the personality that worries about who wants it more, or when, or what, but then where's the consent at the soul level, and how do we meet there? Okay, so Todd, you were saying?
I was just gonna say that really, as I've watched since we opened up, and I've developed a very significant and deep additional relationship, and another very significant and deep relationship that is now coming into our sphere that's maturing pretty rapidly. A lot of what has been true for me is that getting to that soul consent level, there's a whole host of upstream sort of intimacy gates that are required for me anyways. As I move through these intimacy gates, it opens up the space for, and those are really emotionally more so than physically. It opens up the gates for that true soulful consent to whatever it is that shows up between me and these three partners that I have now, or three relationships that I'm cultivating, although they each have a little bit different nuance to them. And for me, it's really those intimacy gates that's fundamental for allowing that to happen.
So intimacy gate, it's just like I'm a yes to what you're saying, but so that we're all on the same page, can you give us an example? Because I often use the term threshold, like there's thresholds that we enter into, and what's a practical example so we know what you're talking about?
I'll give you the example with the latest relationship. As we came together, there was a recognition of each other's sort of soulful energy. And we were able to make connection in workshop exercise construct. We moved off the mountaintop, so to speak. And, you know, the truth is I didn't know a ton about her.
Yeah.
And as we moved out of that really high energy space, we got into now we're in the real world, real relationship. What does this look like? How can it work? What's the logistics, etc. So it's been like, you know, 4 or 5 months that we've slowly increased our communication, deepened the nature of the communication, and then slowly opened up to make room for soulful consent with a fully informed understanding of what we were consenting to.
Yeah. Got it. Good. I love this distinction of, you know, like we meet people in these extraordinary spaces, but who are we in the ordinary? And what does that look like on the daily? Like, you know, the channel of communication, the means of communication, how often we're seeing each other, like all of those are like different thresholds or intimacy.
And the reason that I focus on those things is because moving into relationship intentionally, you know, it's something I want to be really aware of. I have a history of butchering intimacy because of a lack of thoughtfulness, my own mindfulness, etc. So entering into adult relationships fully and authentically, it's super important to me to not inadvertently, you know, cause any bruising or wounding in intimate relationships, then is going to happen anyways through little bumps and bruises, you know. So being really mindful of how things are landing and the dynamics so that people are held in a safe container.
Yeah.
When they become part of our world of tribe.
Yeah.
Containers.
I love that because we're here to love and not do harm. Yeah. And I actually want to bring that home because it's almost easier to be like, ooh, I'm building intimacy with others, and I want to bring it home and say, you know, as we make sexuality our focus this month, for the next couple of weeks, what can we do to create like the container for that the sexual conversations, the sexual, you know, dates. I mean, and spending time with our primaries. And this is so 101 and basic, but to be a master, we need to repeat the foundations, right? We are often doing life and details, and whether it's, you know, parenting or it's homeowning, like whatever, it's so easy to be like caught up in all the other stuff. And then we have all this, you know, like when we're with our other partners, it's easy to be in the sex and the romance. And this is the month where I'm like, let's make sex and romance first here. And let's make that a top priority. To create a container for sex and romance is really different than, hey, we're just spending time together. Because we all know that it takes, like, you have to feel, you know, enough hygiene, or you have to feel enough like resourced in your body or relaxed, or, you know, like there's time, or that there's not interruptions. Like, I mean, there's a lot of like elements that aren't necessary when you're just hanging out, spending time. But it's like, okay, if we're going to be intimate, we have to set the phones aside. We have to really be present with each other. And so I know that you guys know this stuff.
And if we want to use the consents, and we're bringing it in a consent, if we want to look at that as through the lens of the consent map, the thing that I can see that in our relationship, and probably within your relationships as well, would be this idea. If it's a ladder, let's say, you know, and soul consent's up here, one of the rungs of the ladder is that informed consent. And I think, like, us going through the exercise of the 2020 was informing us. It was informing me about what was happening with her. So I was able to get more informed consent, which helped me get to that level, up to that level of the other, you know, soul consent. So you can't neglect those other, you know, layers. Otherwise it can
it collapses under the weight of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a great way of saying it. But these exercises are to do that, to get those levels of consent, which will lead to intimacy as well.
Yeah, the consent is a big piece, and it's something we take for granted because we're in deep partnership. We say, oh, this is actually,
we have permission already to
I had a coaching session. Exactly. A coaching session with a kinky couple who had been like wildly kinky for 20 years together, and their sex life was getting really
stagnant.
Yeah. And so when I asked them about, their safe word, they're like, oh, we stopped using that years ago. And I was like, why? Well, they're like, well, we know each other's boundaries. We know, they're really experienced. They really know each other. And it's like, did you also stop having negotiations before your scenes? They're like, yeah, because we pretty much know what the other person, is into or not into. And it's like, that's where it stops. So let's put that back in place where you really have the boundaries, fears, desires conversation where you're like, what are we co-creating? So there is a negotiation in the beginning, and the safe words are like, start using your yellow, take each other to the yellow and start using that. And then, the next month was like the hottest month they had in 20 years. And it's really like, this is where we get lazy, is at the basics. And having that basic, like, oh, what do we want to create tonight? What's our intention? What Michael and I, and most of our lovemaking is, it doesn't matter whether it's kinky or not, most of our lovemaking is sex magic. And so there's what do we want to dedicate our orgasmic energy to tonight? Like that will happen. And if it doesn't happen before and we find ourselves making love somewhere through, he'll say, I'm dedicating our orgasmic energy to this. Or maybe it happens afterwards. I remember at one time we had said our default, especially because we're in this peaceful partnership where we're dedicating our love towards peace. And so our default, if we forgot to dedicate our orgasm to something, it was to world peace. And then we just remind each other. But the point is to not go into habit and assumption, come back to like Lisa and Greg are like, okay, we're in the dating phase again and getting to know each other and beginner's mind with each other. That's very sexy. Yeah. Yeah. So this is beautiful.
Yeah.
We are going to.
It's 11:06.
Good. I wanted to talk about the one more assignment. Unless anyone else had anything on soul consent. The other homework assignment we had is the dyad relationship evolving on about sexuality. And, we talked about it last week. Raise your hand if you did it. Did anyone get a chance to do it this week? Slackers, spanking for all of you.
Do you guys need me to write it on the text stream?
I wrote it already.
Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on the Facebook book. And I think I do hold strong on wanting you to do this dyad. I know that Greg and Lisa practiced the dyad right before this. And you mentioned, Greg, that there was resistance to doing it. There will be resistance because I have to do, fill out the form. I have to do this and it feels so structured.
But it's a deep part of that informed consent part when you start to hear, the reply and you're witnessing it. That's actually, it's informing you about what's happening with the other person in the sexuality. It's a pretty direct link to that.
Yeah. So Michael's making this distinction of information because a lot of people say yes, but it's like, what are you saying yes to? The information is I'm hearing your heart and I'm holding it in mine. And I now have information, not just logical information, but like I'm not in relationship with a fantasy or projection or a limiting belief. I'm in relationship with the truth of who you are as you reveal yourself in this dyad.
As you think that we agree on this and you think that we, you need to know this about me. Those are deep questions. And as you go through rounds of the dyad, it's layers of the onion. We're getting to see further and further in there, with each other.
Yeah. And, it's transrational. What actually gets transmitted in these aren't just communication exercises. It'd be easy to just be like, I'm answering questions. No, we're revealing ourselves from our depths. And it's less about the words and more about the listening. It's less about the words and more about the I'm feeling an energy that's coming through and I'm transmitting it to you and you're receiving it. And in some ways, the actual practice is sex itself. It's a energy exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And to treat it as such, it's not like, oh, let me check this off my list of homework assignments. It's like, hey, this is a deep intimacy practice. And I want to, bring all of my awareness and presence to everything that arises.
Yeah. The dyad, it's called a relationship evolving dyad. And so it has a deeper function of evolution for your relationship.
Yeah.
And if it's focused specifically on the sexual part, it's going to help you evolve the sexuality. And I think you're hinting to that it's something like a yoga, where, you're never arriving anywhere. Just because you've done it once doesn't mean you're done. We've been doing it for probably most of our relationship, and we do it regularly. We do it with our son and we do it with our friends when we're traveling, because it's something that, it's constantly fresh. It constantly changes as we're, feeling those things and as we're, evolving our relationship.
Yeah. And just to point at the definition of evolution, because I think sex is so inherent to how evolution happens, is that it's emergent. It's like, okay, when you bring two things together, right, what comes about as a result, not just the child that spawns, but what are the brain children? What are the ideas? What, what the two of us are always more as a result of our interchange. And the evolution is the cutting edge of what's growing and becoming through us. Whereas the opposite of evolution is entropy, which is where we're dying off and becoming less. So we want to, we know the laws of nature, which is if we're not, evolving, there might be an entropy. And we see that with couples who are stagnating. It's like we want to constantly be on that evolving edge, not just especially in sexuality. So in all areas of our life, but especially in sexuality, we want that to be constantly creative and growing us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And especially with us poly people, you think about this, we're in a special environment, all of us here, because we're poly. We're kind of like Darwin was looking at the Galapagos Islands because there was no other influences around it. But we're not on that little island. We're in this environment that has all kinds of factors that are changing it. That's why evolution happened outside so differently. For us, because we have those factors, especially the other relationships, our evolution is going to happen very differently, and we have to be present to it. Like doing this exercise will allow us to kind of stay in touch with what's happening with that evolution, so that we don't get left behind by evolution. So we're the what are the we don't want us, the poly people, to be the Cro-Magnon. Was it the Cro-Magnons that got left behind? Right? We're different.
Actually, it's my orientation is to feel like just as we are visioning what's happening in society, it feels like this is the evolution, as people are marriage as a structure is kind of crumbling and people are recognizing that there's alternative ways.
You see poly all the time and in the dating sites now, and
this is really the direction of the evolution. And it's powerful to be a part of that. Todd?
Just for additional reflection on that, as I converse with my younger children, well, not my youngest, but my middle children, none of which are mine, the awareness around it and the acceptance
So high.
is profound. The reflection of, it feels from 20 somethings that they feel like non-monogamy is more prevalent than monogamy in their generation.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing here is to transmit whatever knowledge about how to do that in a way that doesn't increase people's wounding and again starts to move us towards a bigger societal container of safety in relationships as opposed to what we have now.
And the way we do it is what we're doing right now, which is making really healthy, relationships that can show as models, to others, that we're doing deep and we're doing free, in a big way. And people don't know how to do that, but that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and we're modeling it. And I think for me, then the big question becomes, based on the quality of what I see us doing in this mastermind in parallel to other work that I'm doing, Renee's doing outside of this, whether that be for you guys in ISTA, us in High, et cetera, as we move out of those circles out into the world, it's like, how do we transmit this in a way that's soft enough that people who are hardened to the status quo will be able to open and receive it? And is it going to happen within our generation, or is it just a matter of getting the information out there, hoping that we don't have another book burning within the next, say, millennia, and everything ends up evolving naturally? I think that's probably more likely. But it's incumbent upon our generation then to get the information out there in as digestible a form as we can.
Yeah, and I'm a big Buckminster Fuller fan, who says that, the old structures will crumble in proportion to, our new structures making them obsolete.
Right, for sure.
It's like really about how successful we can make not just our poly partnerships, but our poly pods and the poly community. And like when that becomes a more viable option, that's healthier, that's more sustainable, then a lot of the unhealthy models will fall apart.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel kind of like build it and they'll come.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Okay, so I want to close with some takeaways or insights. So going around the circle once again with you just kind of crystallizing your what you want to say to the group in terms of, this is what I got this week. Okay, so an insight that you got this week that would be valuable for the group to hear in closing. Take a moment to reflect. Who wants to start? My cat obviously has something to say.
Okay, nobody's jumping, so I'll go. I'll lean in. So I think the biggest thing that I'm really sitting with for this week is deepening into some of the practices around the dyad work and deepening into the mechanics of the re-emergence of our intimacy right now and recanvassing the portrait, if you will. Going back, moving from a traditional canvas to maybe this time what we think is more appropriate is to do it on, I don't know, wood. Canvas, whatever it is, however we define it.
That might be hard on my ass, though.
But to canvas and sort of start to paint the picture that we want again, without the smudges and the,
Thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Renee?
Yeah, I love, like, I think Lisa put it best, just like, clearing the slate and starting fresh, and really looking at our sexual intimacy as, you know, this place to create, create sacredly, playfully, you know, just to begin. And
I would add again, I just to reflect back real quickly. I think the important piece here is that the picture's not, you know, I love the picture, but repainting it allows us to revision what it looks like. And for me, you know, whatever we take out into the world is dependent upon the strength of what we do right here.
That is true.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, Lisa.
Lisa.
Oh, okay, I'll go. Yeah, for me, yeah, I'll just echo, you know, kind of the awareness that we had earlier around establishing that kind of renewed, clean connection, and the importance of that, and the ability to do that without trying to force it. And I think the importance of just leaning into it and seeing what new comes up.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm with this new guy, and he wants me to look at this list and let him know what we're gonna do over the next year of our lives, and I'm excited about sharing it with him.
Your new guy's like, he's deep and he's mysterious. I love it. Thank you.
I'm all about mystery.
Yeah. Good. Who's next? Greg?
I'll go, yeah. So Marina and I have our date night tonight, so we'll be going over a lot of this, which is awesome. She's just finishing her retreat, which was something that's really big for her. And yeah, like I said, you know, we're having the call with the attorney on Monday. So I am so grateful for this community, number one. Number two, I'm so grateful for these exercises because, you know, it does keep us connected, intimate, even from 3,000 miles away. You know, you have these kind of deep heart conversations, you feel connected.
Nice.
And it's beautiful. And so we're looking forward to seeing each other in about a week from now, and actually getting maybe 10 of these things checked off in a week.
It's going to be a good week.
Yeah.
Thanks, Greg.
James and Sharmila.
I think for me the takeaway is just sort of the recognition of needing to put more intentional time and direction into our relationship as a whole, but specifically into sexuality. That I think a lot of times things just sort of get comfortable and start operating from default. And I think that a lot of the places where more excitement and improvement can be had is through really intentionally putting time into more practices and conversation, and it's the setup of the kinds of experiences that we want to be sharing together.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, James.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think something similar, but like, you know, as we have like relationships with other people, like the time and energy that goes into those isn't necessarily the same time and energy that goes into us. Wanting to reorganize that.
Good.
Mm.
Wahoo.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. So yes.
I'll share mine. I want to build kind of on that, the metaphor that Todd brought up when he was talking about, you know, doing a new canvas. I think about when you go to the museums in Paris or whatever, there's always a study and then the actual masterpiece, and they show all the ones before, where they were working it up and they were figuring out how to do it. And then they got this masterpiece. And I feel like we all have that with us because we're in these deep relationships. So we have all that study. We've been doing this study, and now we can use this like fineness that we're discovering with the exercises of learning about each other, so that we can paint that new masterpiece, right? And it doesn't, even that masterpiece could be a study for something else, 5 years from now. But it's so beautiful that we've got, we have all of the paints, we have all of the brushes, we have all of that here with these relationships that we have.
Gorgeous. Yeah. Yeah, it's a powerful, art is iterative, and like what's the best version of our sex life, especially in 2020. And since you're such a master of metaphors, I want to bring us back to the wasabi metaphor, because there's a lot of cheap imitations of the wasabi and relationships, but the cultivation that it takes to grow real hot, spicy, like a real, flourishing sex life, it requires a lot of like, this is an art, this is a craft, let's cultivate it. And so I'm really delighted to say that we're it's worth it too. It's like the intensity and the flavor and the depth of real wasabi versus the cheap imitation is like, it's worth doing the work that we're doing. So I'm glad that we're all willing to put in the time and the energy. Yay.
Oh, thank you.
And I look forward to talking about money and finances next month. But please post your 2020 list on the Facebook group so we can learn from each other's goals.
And I'm leaving Friday for Mexico City for 2 weeks of shamanic breath work.
Yeah.
And enjoy your time. You won't be in contact with me after Friday.
Yeah, Michael's got a facilitation training that he's doing, which I'm really, really proud of.
I'm excited, yeah.
Yeah, it was great, Greg, to hear about your meeting with the attorney, and if there's others who have milestones, or life, things that you want to share in life. I know too, we all have other lovers, and so our updates often include, hey, there's a breakup here or an escalation there, and I invite you to bring that to the circle if there's any updates that you want witnessed by this group. Yeah, I know. James is in a new kind of relationship energy, and so I thought I'd out you on that, James.
I think I outed myself a couple of calls ago, but yes, that is definitely a thing.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we love you, and we look forward to seeing you in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Can I just take one little, like a temperature, get like a weather report? Katie and Michael, you guys have got those dates saved for the last weekend for this, to do the retreat up at the cabin, right?
Yeah, we're a hell yes, and I do want to follow up and see who else is into it. Yeah.
Everybody who's like hell yes for Tahoe.
Or even interested, just wanted to.
I didn't actually look at the dates, but the idea sounds like fun.
What's the last date, Kamala Debbie? It's the 4th or something, like the April.
Cinco de Mayo, right around Cinco de Mayo.
So my birthday weekend.
Which weekend is that, Katie?
Oh, hold on, I'm gonna get that to you. 1 second.
For your anniversary, Kamala.
Yeah. James and Sharma and I will be celebrating our 4-year triad.
Mm-hmm. So maybe we'll be celebrating our decade as well.
Just after the 5th is there.
I've got to look for Big Bear because I've got so much out. But not Big Bear. It's Tahoe. Yeah, let me look. Okay, we might have to do this on. I don't have it in this program.
Well, what I'm thinking is
I think it's April too.
What's the date?
I looked at the schedule that I thought I may have written it down wrong, but I thought that we ended in April, and I blocked out the weekend, the first weekend of April.
First weekend.
I'm sorry. Hold on.
Yeah, let's get on the same page because
April 10 through 12.
It's actually yes, thank you, 10 through 12, and I have that saved up at the cabin if those dates are good.
okay, I don't have that in my calendar, so let me
add it. Let me add you right now.
Well, yeah, add me on that, but I need to see what I want to do this, and there's a question mark in my schedule.
You can, yeah.
Yeah.
If it conflicts with anything.
Are you still at san.rr.com, Michael?
Yeah, that's me.
Great. So everybody else has April 10 through 12. Is that it?
And
Yeah, I'm putting it in now.
That's the last day that I have on our schedule for the.
That is our daughter's spring break, like that week prior. So we'll just need to feel into what works for us.
Okay.
Or doesn't work for us.
That'd be one weekend of her whole week off. Is that right?
Right. That'd be like the final weekend. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll do a post and we'll try to get some RSVPs in the.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing it up and
Yay.
and getting it back on the.
I want to do it. I also want Sharmila to consider level 3, and that would be conflicting. So there's other considerations. I just declined. I'm not going to be in Arizona, somewhere else at that same time, so it should be good.
Yay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, sweet. So we'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Love you guys.
Love you guys. Bye.
You guys.